Where we live, there are thousands of roundabouts. It's a town that is built like an octopus. The center is in the middle, and there are tentacles reaching out to all parts of the towns. And each roundabout offers you the option of going either straight or left or right. If you go left or right, you may be diverted, but eventually you will get the options to go back where you wanted to go. And life is like that. There are lots of roundabout ways, diversions. You know, when you travel with a car, you find out that many a time there are repairs being done on the highway, and the way you wanted to take is blocked, and they tell you diversion. Whether you like it or not, that's where you are guided to, and you have to make do with it. But your GPS will indicate to you where to go from there, so you won't get lost. You find yourself in all kinds of little byways and highways, and eventually your trip may be quite different from what you had imagined and envisioned, but you end up being where you want to be. And the Bible is full of stories like that. When the Hebrews left Egypt, God had a plan. He took them out, and he thought himself, well, let me not take them straight to where I want them to be, because if I take them that way, they're going to find opposition. There will be war, there will be enemies, and they may get discouraged. So he ended up drawing a winding way that was looking confusing to them. And at a point, they themselves said, but what are we doing here? This is not the way we wanted to go. Why not go straight? But God knew better. And we have also examples of long stories of people that ended moving from pillar to post before they found themselves where they wanted to be and where God planned them to be. And such a story is the story of Joseph in Genesis. Joseph was a young man of 17. He was the last of the crop, and he was the preferred son of the father. And so the father, doted on him. And that displeased the other boys greatly. And then, on top of that, that young man started having dreams. And in his dreams, he saw his brothers and his father prostrating before him, bowing before him. And instead of keeping quiet over it, because he was inexperienced and, a bit boastful, he just said it out. And that didn't go well with either. The father said, that's not a good way of talking. But the father thought about it, meditated upon those dreams. But they didn't make sense at all. He was the last born, they were shepherds, And then, instead of these dreams coming true, Joseph was sent on errand by the father to just kind of spy on the others, to make sure that they were doing what they were supposed to do in the fields. The others saw him arriving and said, aha, today be the day. And they decided to punish him, threw him in a pit that was dry, then went from there to selling him into slavery to merchants that were going into Egypt. Then he found himself in Egypt and was sold to be the head servant in somebody's palace. That was a servant of Pharaoh himself. And then it seemed to go well with him. He was appreciated, he did well, he worked well, he was honest, zealous. Unfortunately, Potiphar's wife got a crunch on him and decided to draw him to sleep with her. When he refused, Eventually he had to run away, and she grabbed his coat and he left without. And she used that against him, reported him to the husband, who threw him into prison. So just see, from being the preferred son, he ended up being sold into slavery, then serving a servant, then thrown into prison, and he stayed there for years. But in prison, he was a model prisoner, so much that the head guard of the prison, confided in him, gave him, the charge of all the prisoners. So he became the second in command in the prison. But that was not God's plan. It was just like one of these winding ways. And he stayed there for years, serving, pleasing the guards. And then 2 prisoners were thrown into prison from Pharaoh's court, and they started having dreams, and Joseph explained the dreams to them, just for the good of him. And then they managed to get out of prison, forgot about him, and he stayed on until Pharaoh himself had dreams that nobody could explain. And all of a sudden, the wine tester for him remembered and said, I forgot to tell you, there was that man in the prison that explained the dreams. And eventually, Joseph was promoted, not only out of prison, but second in command in Egypt, in charge of the whole economy, the business head of Egypt. And eventually, in the fullness of time, his whole family came and bowed before him, and his dream came true. But by that time, he had learned a lot of lessons. First of all, he was not boastful anymore. He learned humility. He learned trusting God. He learned waiting, being patient in tribulation, resilient in difficulty. He learned that the timing of God is not his own. He learned that God's ways are not our ways. He learned a lot. By the time he was promoted in Egypt, he was now the perfect person to take on that job without being destroyed. And that's the way we learn. We find in our lives that lots of such byways and highways. Many people start with a foggy idea about what they could do in life. They try this job, that job, and eventually find their dream job. Sometimes it takes years. For us, we had an experience first time of such byways. When we were in Nigeria, we never thought about going out as a family. We were quite happy where we were. We had been there for more than 15 years. As a family, all of a sudden I got an invitation to get an international scholarship from an international body based in Canada. And I offered it to the whole department. But none of my colleagues could meet all the conditions. And I was the only one that could. So I tried, I applied, and I got it. And then we went to France for a year. And that was, I thought, the perfect occasion to relocate to France, because that was our own idea of things. We thought, when Nigeria is quite hard, let's try. My colleagues in the CNRS were even pushing me. You can't stay there, it's unstable, it's difficult. They tried to help me relocate. It didn't work at all, because for God it was just one of these winding ways. He wanted us to pass through there. And we had a very difficult year, very taxing year. But we had to learn a lot. And we learned first to live as a family, just husband, wife, and kids. Whereas before we were like an enjoyable colony with 15 to 18 people in the house every day. We were not used to be just on our own. So we had to learn how to cope with that, the proximity, the tensions. Then we had to learn to cope with a foreign culture, because by that time, France had become a foreign land to us. We are very Nigerian. We were not used to the idea of space, the way to talk, the way to worship. Everything was different, including our own family, my own family. We had to also learn to cope with an environment that was different. In particular, my sister-in-law was used by God to teach me how to take the underground in Paris, and that proved invaluable when I reached London later on. We had learned to adjust to different churches that were very different from our own. We had a culture shock, from Nigerian life and culture and language to another one, learning how to talk differently, and so many other things. And also God used that time to give us clothing for the winter, because he planned that we would go to London in October the following year. But we never thought about this. That was not in our own plans at all, not a choice at all. But he gave us all these clothes, and then when we were going back to Nigeria, we told God, but we don't need these things in Nigeria, these winter clothes. If you want us to take it, well, you have to provide the money, because it will cost us extra at the airport. And God provided 2 people that gave us the exact amount we didn't know that would be asked of us by the airline. And eventually God took us to London, and that was not our plan. And then when we went to London, I had to pass through another of these narrow ways. I was a university professor, and God made me not to find job there, but only as a cleaner in a secondary school. Then at a primary school, I was just busy cleaning toilet at 6 o'clock in the morning. And it came to a point I couldn't find anything else, and I told God, is that what you want me to do the rest of my life? And it is only when I surrendered and say, God, that's okay. If you want me to abandon my books, my knowledge, my everything, and do that, fine, I'll follow you. Then God released me into what he planned for me. That was to rejoin the university environment. And I want to encourage you, if you are in one of these winding ways, just relax, enjoy the ride, and let God lead you. Let his light be your light for the journey, and you'll find yourself where you're supposed to be.